What does it look like to live for God in today's world? How are others living their faith in their work and their passions? We talk with individuals who are Christians first about what living their life for God looks like in the everyday. Welcome to the Clear and Present Faith Podcast. Hello, and thanks for joining me for this episode of the Clear and Present Faith Podcast. This is Paul, and I'm so glad you're spending some time with us today. Please take a moment to subscribe to the Clear and Present Faith Podcast on your favorite platform, like this episode, and share it with a friend, family member, or coworker. Also, make sure to check out and subscribe to our website, clearandpresentfaith.com, where I post weekly blogs on a variety of spiritual topics, and you get updates as we go live on more platforms. I've also renamed a section of the website entitled Ask a Christian. If you have a spiritual question or a prayer request, please take a moment to bring it to us through the form on the website. And you never know, maybe it will be the topic of a future blog or podcast. Some argue that scientific explanations for natural phenomena, like the Big Bang or evolution, render God unnecessary. God's role as the creator of the universe is called into question, and there are many who assume that pursuing careers in science create an inherent challenge for Christians. My guest today is Todd Chandler. Todd is a biology professor at a small private liberal arts college. I really enjoyed the conversation we had about how science doesn't operate in opposition to God. In this first part of the interview, we talk about the journey that led to Todd's love of biology, how modern science was built by people trying to better understand God, and how studying science can actually reinforce, not deteriorate, your faith. Part 2 will be out in a couple of weeks, so make sure to tune back in to hear about an amazing study abroad trip that he led to the Galapagos Islands. In the meantime, here's the first part of my conversation with Todd Chandler. My guest today is a gentleman who has certainly dedicated his life to serving God and serving those around him. As a former evangelist, he has preached in Kentucky and Florida. Additionally, he is a college professor teaching biology and advising students on their applications to postgraduate professional school opportunities like medical school, physical therapy school, dental school, and veterinary school. He serves as a deacon in a local congregation of God's people in Lutz, Florida. Together, he and his wife Jeannie have raised 4 amazing kids, and he maintains just the right healthy amount of disdain for Duke University basketball. So I'm excited to welcome to the podcast today my friend Todd Chandler. Todd, thanks for coming in.
It's my pleasure, Paul. Appreciate the introduction. Both compliments for our children. We love them. And you're right on Duke.
So you'll remember this story, but a few months ago, both the evangelists at the congregation were out and you stepped in to fill in one Sunday morning.
Right.
And you decided you were going to use an example from the Final Four from years ago, and growing up a Kentucky basketball fan, that was hurtful.
But it stings a bit, doesn't it?
It's still all these years later, but no, we're very excited to have a chance to chat with you a little bit today. I want to really focus a lot of our conversation first around the work that you do, because I think when we think about going into the sciences, and whether you're becoming a professor, you're going into engineering, you're going into a field that really does a lot to try to fly in the face of what God teaches us about the world that he created. And I want to talk just a little bit today about what that's been like for you and being involved in that. So let's start with just the beginning. Why did you decide to study biology?
I think I first got really interested in biology in high school. I had an excellent teacher who hooked me on just how interesting it can be. And so I went to college, like a lot of people. I wasn't exactly sure I wanted to do. A lot of things I found interesting, but I always liked biology. I always liked that. So that's what I studied, and I became a zoology major there at the University of Florida. Possibly I knew I had some possible interest maybe in pursuing some branch of medicine. Decided not to do that in the long run. And I found value in knowing how life works and how the world works. I just enjoyed it, and I still enjoy it. So I think what attracted me to it was it explains why things are what they are, and not only human biology, which is particularly interesting, but just the planet as a whole. and the world as a whole. And to me, I found that worth my time and worth the effort. I just tell people, when you're sitting there reading a textbook, a biology textbook, and enjoying it, you know a couple things. You know you're a nerd, but you know you're studying the right thing.
Right.
And that's where I found myself, those two things.
Well, and for those of us who changed their major 7 times in college, it certainly is helpful to discover that early
Yes, it
on.
is. Yes, it is.
I think my mother was thankful it only took me 5 years to finish a bachelor's degree and not like 12 after all of that.
No, it took me an extra semester as well. That's just the nature when you don't really know what you're doing going in sometimes.
Yeah. So I kind of introed this talking about, the way modern science approaches theology and the way it approaches the concept of creationism. A lot of it, they really try to explain away everything in every other way possible. And so what challenges did you encounter as a Christian studying this subject that really kind of opposes the idea sometimes of God as the creator of the universe?
Yeah, I was very fortunate that I never had to deal with an aggressive, antagonistic professor. I know some who have had to deal with that, but I never did, either undergrad or graduate school, and that was a real fortunate blessing for me. There were challenges, though, in it. One of the challenges was simply the constant, unquestioned presence of Darwinism. It's the fundamental idea of all life science is Darwinism. And when you have the persistence behind the push of that idea, it's in everything you read, it's in every textbook, it's in every lecture, that over time, that persistent drumbeat of an idea is going to affect you one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so after a while, you find yourself wondering, am I questioning this for unreasonable reasons?
Right.
For reasons that are faulty. And so that was a challenge. Part of that was addressed when I was at the University of Florida, and a group called Veritas Forum, which started in Harvard in the early 90s. It's a group, and they would go around and hold events on campus. Sort of open dialogue, pursuing truth is the idea. I think they're a faith-based movement, though. I think Veritas Forum still exists. But anyway, they had an event on the campus, and I went to that. And as I walked in, I saw and made eye contact with the TA for my microbiology lab. And that was, as simple as that is, that was sort of a poignant moment, actually, because it reinforced to me as a young student, as an undergrad, that, okay, here's a graduate student at a major public university who is willing to attend this forum that is explicitly challenging Darwinist worldview. And that was encouraging to me. I was like, okay, there's other people around here who are willing to challenge this, who are very successful in what they're doing at a very good university. And so that helped, that kind of a challenge. I also ran a challenge when I faced questions without clear answers. And I think going into the study of science, going into college, I had what may be a common idea, a mistaken idea, that science gives answers to things, and they have the answers to things. And there's a lot of questions that just don't have a clear answer on either side of the Darwin issue and lots of issues. And so I have become much more comfortable with unknowns. So I would, for instance, face a question and think, well, how do I address this question?
Yeah.
And I couldn't find a really clear answer to sort of drive a stake in. And initially that sort of bothered me. But I've learned that actually there are many, many such questions, of course, not just in science.
Yeah, well, in all areas of life.
All areas of life, right. And so seeing that science is just among those kinds of disciplines, those kinds of questions, also helped me calm some of those doubts, potential doubts about things. That I don't have to have an answer for every question, because nobody does. And certainly Darwinism doesn't. That also became more obvious the longer I studied as well. There was also a challenge, sort of thinking differently, the challenge to my faith of staying quiet. Because you feel like a very small fish in a pond with very big fish. And you are when you're at a university. So I had my evolution professor was very well known. He was a member of the Linnaean Society. There's an International Honor Society. Well, who am I as a junior to go up against this guy? I was highly intimidated by that. So there are disappointments in myself in some of those moments where I could have spoken up and I didn't. And in that way, it was a challenge. There was a time I went to another professor. She was an anthropology professor. Took an elective called Human History and Evolution. And it was all about the alleged pre-human species and all that arose. An excellent teacher. She was very, very good. And I went to talk to her in office one day. I said, I'm just going to do this, talk to her. And she was so kind and so professional and respectful. And I learned, okay, this is how it ought to be, and it is.
Mhm.
So sometimes the image we have of a real aggressive academia that is predacious on people who want to challenge Darwinism is a caricatured idea. There are those people,
Sure.
but I was blessed not to really run into any of those. That talk with that professor could have gone really wrong, could have gone really
Sure.
sideways, right? And I could have really hurt my grade and all that. We've seen that even in the last couple of weeks. It wasn't a Darwinist idea, but there was a recent article, I think this week, about a student at the University of Oklahoma who, more of in the social sciences,
Sure.
received 0 on assignment because of a certain position she took on something. I was blessed not to have to that, but there were a number of challenges that I faced. But along the way, fortunately, I was able to find ways that helped buffer those.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about the conversation you have with the anthropology professor is what lessons we can learn from that as we're even talking about people of other faith with what we see in the Bible, and to approach it with that sense of respect and say, I'm coming to hear your position and to understand what you believe so that we can talk about it.
Absolutely.
Because one of the things that I learned in persuasive speaking years and years ago when I finally did settle on a major, is that the quickest way to get someone to shut you down is to shut them down. And you can't just approach a situation and say, you are completely wrong. There has to be that rapport that's built. And so
Absolutely.
and so there's even that lesson I think we can take from as we're talking with people of other faith about what they believe and what we believe, so we can come to a better understanding of what God has shown us in his word.
Yeah, that healthy communication is vital for that.
Yeah.
Right? And I learned that along the way as well.
Absolutely. So how has studying biology and science helped you to strengthen your faith?
I love that question because that's exactly what it should do. That's what God designed it to do. So I would say my faith has experienced Romans 1:20 and Psalm 19, that if you study God's creation, you see God because he's talking to you in it, day and night. He's talking to you in it. And I have learned that truth in pursuing it. And I would encourage students to do that. I've seen purpose, telos in that, the teleology.
Yes.
In certainly in biology I have. And I've seen it in the same way I see that in other things, in other objects. And that's one of the most powerful arguments, I think, that you can make for the existence of a creator, is that you see design and purpose in biology, certainly. You see that. And the deeper you go into it, I had this idea that the deeper you go molecularly, which is sort of my world, or the farther you go in astronomy, which is very much not my world,
Right.
is we are so far from ever reaching an end to that. It's as though God built into creation so much depth, where whatever direction you look, that you think you've discovered something, sort of the limits of something, only to realize eventually that no, not at all. There's so much more to this.
It's infinity in both directions.
Yes, that is what it seems to be. And so the design is just layer upon layer and dimension upon dimension. And they're all dependent on each other for the whole thing to work. So it really reinforced to me the existence of a mind or a power to create what I'm studying. Also, God's existence was reinforced by what you see in nature is incredible beauty and design and pleasure. You also see terrible suffering and things that are really ugly or that smell really bad. And in a way, I think to me, that taught me that it's the goodness and the severity of God. He is tremendous in both. His grace and goodness is sort of more than we can really comprehend. And Scripture's pretty clear that his wrath is greater than we can comprehend in many ways. And I think nature shows that and illustrates that God has both these sides to him, and we can honor both. I can't explain both, certainly. I can't, and I don't need to, justify him in both, but I see them there. So even the ugly, sort of unpleasant side of biology has a lot to think about in it.
Well, and I love the way you put that. Years ago, I had heard someone make a comment that initially perked my ears up because I was like, wait, what? Where are we going with this? But it was, he was talking in front of a group of people, and he was saying, I believe that God has revealed himself through his 2 books. And I was like, wait a second. There's one book. It's in the pew in front of me here. And then, and of course, he went on then to say the book of his revealed word to us through the Bible and the book of his creation. And so obviously a metaphorical book in terms of the creation piece of it. But I love how you drew out that idea of it demonstrates both ends of the expansiveness of God, and that
Right.
there's the beauty and there's the order, and then there's the wrath on the other side of
Right.
that.
And as you know, the challenge of suffering, explaining suffering, has been one of the key challenges to faith for many, many generations, and it remains so. And I would say personally, that's been my greatest challenge to faith, is the suffering, particularly the suffering of innocent, or
Sure.
those who like children and those kinds of things. And I can't explain all that, but I think that can work for your faith, and not just against it. And I've learned that.
Yeah.
in
Well,
biology.
I'm going to give you some time to figure that out, and I'll have you back on again, and we'll talk about
I'll give you
that topic.
Yeah, I'll wrap it up in a 5-minute. Here's all the answers everybody's ever looked for.
Nice. So you're in a position in your current role as a biology professor, as an academic advisor. You work with a lot of students, and particularly young Christians, as they're exploring what their career paths are going to look like and what their earthly work will be as they're looking for ways to fulfill their heavenly mission here on earth. What recommendations would you make to a young Christian who is looking at going into the sciences, into medical school, into veterinary school, those kinds of things?
Right. I would start by reminding them that faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. So don't expect science to produce faith. That's not where faith comes from. It can tell us that God exists, but what man knows the mind of a man except the spirit of the man that is in him, Paul wrote there in 1 Corinthians 2. And so what man knows the things of God except the Spirit of God? That's the Spirit we have. So to know the mind of God, you got to go to the Bible. You got to go to Scripture.
Yeah.
So I would remind them first of that. Immerse yourself in Scripture. Know it, think about it, learn it, memorize it, study it. That's where it all begins, because that's where faith begins. And then jump into science. It's cool and it's fun. So absolutely pursue it. It's exciting, and it's where all the cool kids hang out, is what I say when I tell my students. And do that with a humble confidence. Paul later in 1 Corinthians 8 said, knowledge puffs up. And one of the classic problems with science, because science looks to figure out the world. How's the world work? And you figure out something really cool or interesting or new that no one else has figured out before. There is a natural temptation to start thinking, I'm pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
I'm the cool stuff.
Yeah.
And so we need to approach it with a humble confidence that, yes, we can learn this and keep our faith, but in fact, that's what it's designed to do. The study of science is designed to bolster faith. That's what God designed nature to do, is to reveal himself to it. So be honest about various positions and viewpoints that I have going in, that I'm going to hear from other people. Be open to those viewpoints, and be open to adjusting where I'm askew in some way, or I have a misperception of a certain perspective. That's really important. I would also, sort of as a third point, remind them to communicate questions with people transparently. Because you're going to have them. You're going to have faith questions. I mean, I had all kinds of them. And I still have faith questions, of course. And it's really important to find people with whom we can communicate transparently and honestly about those things. It's tragic to see some young people who I've known, whom you have known, who have gone on to study, advanced study, lose their faith. And it seems, as best I can tell, nobody in their inner circle of friends or family ever knew they were questioning or challenging it.
Yeah.
And that's just a travesty, to think of those questions alone. The fourth sort of piece of advice I would recommend is to reject the story that science and religion are at war and have always been at war.
Okay.
They're not. That's a false narrative. There's some great discussion about that. Stephen Meyer talks about it a little bit early in his book, Return of the God Hypothesis. Early, I think it's chapter 1. He talks just a couple of pages about this, but he'd give you some references to look at. But this whole idea that science and religion are at war and always have been at war really arose in the late 19th century, late 1800s, sort of after Origin was produced and all.
Okay.
But man, that idea has become really well entrenched in our culture. But you go back, and modern science was established by people who did science to understand God better. That was their motivation. It wasn't anti-God at all. It was to find God. I mean, we're talking about big names. I mean, Newton was a guy like that. Boyle was like that. Boyle's law. Kepler was like that. And so they had a belief in the Creator and a belief in God, and that's partly what drove them to study science. So reject the narrative that science and religion have to be at war with each other. They don't. They can very much coexist, and in fact, encourage one another in very positive kind of ways.
I appreciate the point you made about having that network where you can have that transparent communication, finding a mentor that is grounded and is somebody you can bounce ideas off of and say, what did you do when you encountered this? And what did you, it's really important in any field that we go into, and especially helpful when we can find a Christian that has gone through all the exact same things that we have, to have someone to bounce those ideas off of.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think that potential threat or the conflict between a biblical view and an academic, more secular kind of view is not at all restricted to the sciences. I mean,
no,
it's pretty dangerous to go into the social sciences because the whole worldview is so thoroughly secular. So if you're going to study psychology, you have to go with your feet well grounded and your head on your shoulders, or you're going to be in real trouble. So biology is the same way.
Well, and even the major I settled on, communication, a lot of it is human philosophy. And so it's how did communication evolve, to use some language from science? How did communication evolve from pointing and motioning to grunts and all this, that, and the other?
Oh,
and
yeah,
so
absolutely.
that's just the nature of education, is to expose you to new ideas.
That's right.
And it's a matter of learning to understand where those ideas fit into God's plan.
That's right.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Clear and Present Faith podcast. I hope you were encouraged by today's conversation. Please like and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and share with a friend. If you have any questions or would like to submit a prayer request to the show, please reach out via our website at clearandpresentfaith.com/contact us. The music for today's episode is entitled Reign of Light by Eros Young and was taken from upbeat.io. I hope you'll tune in for our next episode. In the meantime, I pray that you are able to find those moments where you can live for God in your everyday, and that He will bless you and your family. See you next time.